Joining me now is former White House Chief of Staff and Senior Advisor at Bondi Partners, your friend and mine, Mick Mulvaney. Mick, thanks so much for coming on the program this week. We got to start with the big news of the last 24, 48 hours, which is this grab of Donald Trump talking about Kamala Harris at a black journalist convention. Just have a little listen to this.
She was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
Now, Mick, on one level, Donald Trump has a point because Kamala Harris has in the past played up being the first Indian-American senator and her Indian heritage in a whole bunch of venues. But how does this play here with the wider public? Because I'm wondering if this is getting a bit of the focus off of, the economy, borders, things like this that are really his strong suits here.
Yeah, James, it reminds me of the times that I used to talk to the president during the 2020 campaign, and I would make suggestions about how I thought maybe he was off message here or there. And he would always look at me and say, so, Mick, how many times have you won an election for president? 0? Okay, we're going to do it my way. This is one of the times I would have that conversation with him and say, look, Mr. President, I get it. I suppose I get it. I mean, you can be both black and Asian, and that's not something that's impossible to do. In fact, it is what Kamala Harris is. But more importantly, I think politically, every single minute he is not talking about the border or about inflation, he's talking about something that voters probably don't care very much about. At the end of the day, if I was in the Oval Office at the end of that speech that you just showed, I'd ask him, say, Mr. President, did we gain any votes today? Who did we pick up with that, as opposed to talking about the things that we know we can do well on, which is the economy, immigration, Israel, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that there's a bit of a danger right now for the Trump campaign that the Republicans are letting the Democrats define the race, and Trump gets drawn into these fights. But Kamala Harris and the Democrats, they're now just running on the vibe of the thing and not really getting any proper scrutiny now. Is that where we are at the moment?
Listen, it's a great point, and one that Trump could have made, and he made a little bit during that interview with the National Association of Black Journalists. That's what the clip that you just showed, where later on he said, look, I'm here. Kamala Harris didn't even show up. That's a good message, because you're absolutely right. Kamala Harris hasn't, I think she's taken one question, and this is not an exaggeration, one question since she became the presumptive nominee. And the question was, have you picked a vice president yet? And her answer is not yet. So one question and a 2-word answer. That's it over the course of the last 10 days. These are the things that Republicans can and should be drawing attention to, instead of what the president talked about at that conference.
Yeah, and at the same time, we've also got the, still sitting President Joe Biden sitting in the office. He's doing possibly one event a day, I think he's now doing. Who is actually, Mick, running the country? Because Kamala Harris seems to be acting in kind of a sort of a de facto trainee hat president role now.
Well, let's make one thing perfectly clear. She was never running the country anyway. Even when he was at his worst, and he's not getting any better, the vice president is not the typical person who's sort of run the place. It would be the Biden inner circle, which would be at the end here, it's his immediate family, his wife and his sons, or his son and one of his daughters, I think, and the chief of staff and other members of the cabinet. That's who's running the place. It was never the vice president. The vice president runs the country in our system after the president dies, and that's about it. Up until then, it's not a very significant, it can be, but typically it doesn't play a very significant role in running the nation.
Yeah, fair enough. Now, listen, we've had other big news come in a little while ago that a massive prisoner swap with Russia has taken place. Real Cold War kind of stuff here almost. And among those swapped and receiving their freedom is the wrongfully detained Wall Street Journal journalist Evan Gershkovich, now free. Is this a rare win for Joe Biden's foreign policy here?
Oh, I think it's a win for the country. I was involved in these things when I was in the White House. They are very, very difficult to pull off, James. And the White House is right to celebrate this. I think as we tape this tonight, the hostages will be home later this evening, and the president will fly out to the Air Force Base to meet them. This is a good thing for the country. Now, that being said, I have been critical in the past of the deals that the Biden administration cut to get Americans home from Russia, and thought that we paid too high a price. It may be that we've paid that very, very high price in this particular circumstance. We don't know the terms of the deal yet. But I think it's fair to say, look, until we know the terms of the deal, let's all be happy for the fact that these Americans who were wrongfully detained are home. That's a good thing. Let's agree for the next couple of days, at least it's a good thing. And we can worry about the details as they come out.
Yeah, look, Mick, I think we can all celebrate that, but there's another sort of Justice Department deal that I'm a little more concerned about. It's been revealed that the Department of Justice has cut its own deal with the al-Qaeda terrorists allegedly responsible for plotting the September 11th attacks, and they've now been spared the death penalty. Here's what Vice Presidential Republican candidate J.D. Vance had to say about this.
Today, I heard that the Biden-Harris Department of Justice cut a deal with al-Qaeda terrorist Khalid Sheikh Mohammed to avoid the death penalty. Someone who enlisted in the Marines to serve after 9/11, that is ridiculous, but it's not surprising. Now just think about the point that we've gotten to. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have weaponized the Department of Justice to go after their political opponents, but they're cutting a sweetheart deal with 9/11 terrorists. We need a president who kills terrorists, not negotiates with them.
Aside from being very cynical about the timing of this, that this dropped just before the Russia prisoner swap was announced, how is this possible that the Department of Justice is even contemplating this sort of thing for these horrendous mass murderers?
No, it's even worse than that, James. As of tonight, the Biden White House is saying that they were not involved in those negotiations. Think about that for a second. The President of the United States is saying that his Department of Justice, and keep in mind, there's this impression around the world that the Department of Justice is independent from the White House. It is not. The U.S. Attorney General is an appointed member of the President's cabinet. And what that attorney general is saying is that he cut a deal without talking to the boss. That's just not defensible. That doesn't make any sense at all. You can't, by the way, to say, look, we didn't have anything to do with the bad deal here with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, but let's take all the credit that we want to for getting the folks out of Russia. That's not sitting very well with folks. This is a problem for them. I have no idea if the timing, listen, don't ever, in Washington, D.C., there's a general rule, James, don't ever assume a conspiracy where incompetence will explain things.
It's just indefensible. I don't even know why these people are still alive. But anyway, let's move on to finally the potential vice presidential pick nominee, running mate for Kamala Harris. Apparently, they're going to make a big announcement on Tuesday in Philadelphia. Now, this has put some speculation on the idea that Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania is going to be the pick, but others have pointed out that VPs have been, or running mates have been picked in other states from the states that they're from. Where do you think this is going to go? Is Shapiro going to be it, or is there a problem with him and the Gaza wing of the Democrats if he is, in fact, the one who gets the nod?
You know, just as I was sitting here before we started chatting, there was a story that broke here in Washington about how some progressives are pushing back against the governor of Pennsylvania and calling him genocide. I think his first name is James or Joe. I can't remember. Attacking him for being too pro-Israel. That's a problem within the Democrat Party. I still come back to the point, however, that he's a popular governor of a tremendously important swing state. And if the Democrats really believe that Josh Shapiro can deliver the state of Pennsylvania, they will take him. That's simply too high of a prize for them to leave on the table. Look, you do focus on the fact that the rollout campaign starts in Philadelphia. That's in Pennsylvania. You would think that maybe that gives a hint that they're going to pick Josh Shapiro. But it's not always the case, as you point out. I think when Mitt Romney introduced Paul Ryan, he introduced him in Ohio. Of course, we didn't do very well in that race as Republicans. I'm not sure that's the model the Democrats want to follow. But Democrats certainly have an issue with Governor Shapiro being Jewish. There's going to be folks inside their party that don't like that, and whether or not that factors into the final decision, well, I guess we'll know on Tuesday.
Mick, did you ever think that in 2024 we'd be talking about the Democrats and them not picking a potential number 2 on the ticket because they were Jewish? I mean, that just seems like a real indictment of where we are at the moment.
Yeah, if you'd asked me before October 7th, I'd say it's not possible. That anti-Semitism is something from previous generations and that it's not real. And, I've always had my Jewish friends tell me, no, it's real. And I'm like, well, is it, or is it just something you perceived? It's absolutely real. It's absolutely real in my country right now. It's real around the world. We can see examples of it all over the place. And it is alive and well within a small but very vocal and very important part of the Democrat Party in my country. And that's something for the country to be ashamed of.
And we're seeing it, too, here in Australia with Labor and the Greens. Mick Mulvaney, thank you so much for your time this week. See you next time.